it's important for people to be able to see that there are alternatives for you. And if you're not feeling well, you have, chronic pain, chronic inflammation, in this case, bladder pain syndrome, there are solutions out there for you.
Let's ditch the quick fix and dive into today's conversation. Welcome, everybody. I'm joined today by Dr. Mandy LaGreca. She is the bladder pain coach. Dr. LaGreca is a health educator that specializes in investigating the root cause of ailments. She uses cutting-edge science to help guide clients to optimal health using mind, body, and heart. Dr. LaGreca is recognized across the world as one of the leading experts in interstitial cystitis and painful bladder syndrome. Along with 5 other certifications, Dr. LaGreca is a functional diagnostic nutritionist, which is a type of detective work that seeks to figure out what is going on inside your body and treat dysfunction, not just eliminate the symptoms, but really fix what's going on. Along with that, Dr. LaGreca, you've got also some background in engineering. So you have quite an impressive bio, and the certifications really shows that you've put in the work. So welcome. Glad you're joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
So I kind of wanted to start off with the IC healer. How did you become the IC healer?
Well, plain and simple, I have interstitial cystitis. Well, I want to say had, because mine's in remission. So that's kind of really where it started with me. It wasn't necessarily where I had, intended my health career to go. Because when I started, I was actually working with weight loss clients. And then, I had the bladder pain during that process. And I just realized that, hey, there's a need for someone like myself in this area, this niche.
Right. And so what is interstitial cystitis, and how many people are affected by this kind of in the United States or globally?
So millions of people, men and women, mostly women, but it is painful bladder syndrome really is the umbrella term. The definition is changing throughout the world as far as the difference between IC and bladder pain syndrome. We still call it interstitial cystitis, though in reality, IC is now going to be associated with the specific subtype of IC, which has Hunner's lesions and ulceration of the bladder, which is associated with a specific virus. And then everyone else is going to be considered bladder pain syndrome. Okay. So it's about 10% are IC, and then the 90% are bladder pain syndrome. But, I think we still call it IC because that's kind of the name that it's kind of stuck with. But just wanted to differentiate that. So really, it's painful bladder syndrome. It's consistent of a lot of discomfort in the bladder pelvic region. Could be vaginal, could be urethral. It consists of a lot of bathroom visits, going to the bathroom a lot, urgency, frequency, pain, a lot of pain and discomfort.
So does it affect women primarily, or is this a men as well as women, children? Are they impacted?
So I've had some male clients, but generally they're women. I would say probably 90% are women over the age of 30, generally, though I've lately have been having more come through the door that are in their 20s. And my youngest so far is 19. I haven't seen children, but I know they exist because I've seen it, I've in Facebook pages and things. I've heard other parents talk about it, but it's not as prevalent. So mostly women over age 30.
Gotcha. And so what is the kind of some of the root causes that you found with your own, experience, as well as with the patients that you treat? What are some of the causes, the etiology, if you will?
Well, that's the $1 million question, right? In literature, it's called idiopathic, which means of unknown etiology. However, I don't agree with that just because of what I've seen through clinical practice and, labs, and a lot of other integrative experts will agree with me on this one. So what we're finding out is there's a strong association with mast cell activation and oxalates. I'll explain what that is. Yep. From both dietary factors as well as endogenous production, like your body's producing them. And there's also a strong association with mold, actually. Okay. So getting into that piece of it, now the literature in there is scarce, but it does exist. There is literature about bladder pain, inflammation of the bladder related to these oxalate crystals. And oxalates are basically crystals that are found in plant-based foods, but that's not the only place they're found. We are producers of oxalates as part of the human metabolism. Plants make it, animals make it, we make it. And they're just little crystals that they tend to bind to minerals because they chelate minerals. So generally, we're familiar with calcium oxalate crystals when it comes to kidney stones, for example. Like that's the one everyone knows about, calcium oxalate. So if someone has a kidney stone, it's an oxalate, generally calcium oxalate crystal. But what we're finding is that cause a lot of irritation and sets up a cascade of inflammatory events. And this can lead to the cycle of persistent inflammation and recurring injury to the lining of the bladder, leading to alterations in the local environment, which means areas surrounding the bladder. That's where the pelvic pain can come into play, or vaginal pain, vulvodynia. All of that in that area can be very inflamed because of this local environment being, damaged essentially. And so that happens is what we're finding is, because a lot of the IC people who put people on the IC diet think it's the foods are the cause. But in reality, we believe that the foods are the result of already having a damage. I mean, think about let's say you burn your hand and you have an injury to your hand. Well, anything that crosses that, like urine's acidic, right? It's very acidic. So if that area is damaged, then it's going to hurt. So that's kind of what we're finding. And I have been able to verify that with the many, many clients that I've worked with about this oxalate connection, very strong influence, and mast cells.
So do you have an association between just the whole digestive tract? I mean, starting in the oral cavity all the way through to the bladder area itself? I mean, is there a connection to leaky gut or other comorbidity kind of things?
Makes a lot of sense because in order to metabolize oxalates, you need to have the microbiome to support that. So it's very complicated because I think that our diet is promoting a lot of oxalates. If you look around and see a lot of these plant-based meats and milks and, the cashew milk, the almond milk, the, gluten-free. And as we've gone gluten-free, we've gotten very high in oxalates because a lot of the gluten-free products, like gluten-free breads, are very high in these high oxalate grains. So I think there's a lot of things going on. I think there is, there's a really good movie. I have a lot of my students, but I'm also a teacher. I teach biology at the college level. I have them watch a movie called Let Them Eat Dirt. It's called Let Them Eat Dirt. Great movie. Everyone should watch it, because it opens your eyes to the microbiome of the, how important it is and diversity of the microbiome. These little bugs, I think they get affected from the time that we're born because, I was a C-section baby.
Sure.
I was born C-section. So it wasn't, my mom didn't breastfeed.
So you didn't get that.
So I didn't get that. No. And then as a result of that, I was sick all the time. And back, in the 80s, they were giving me antibiotics like it was candy. So every month I was on that pink penicillin. So I look back and say, wow, what happened to me? Oh yeah, I wasn't breastfed. I was C-section and I was given a lot of antibiotics, a lot, So I think that it seems common theme when I talk to people in their health history, because part of what I do is I do a very comprehensive health history, at least an hour face-to-face and another hour behind the scenes. So just to dig in to see what could have triggered this upstream, because upstream is what we need to look at with gut. And then, about 80 to 90% have already gut symptoms. So they'll have IBS, SIBO, digestive discomfort, bloating, all those symptoms as well.
Yeah. So essentially kind of summarize there a little bit. Yeah. For your experience, when babies don't get a chance to pass through the birth canal, they lose, I think remember 25 to 30% of immune, boost opportunity just by being a natural birth. And then if you get on, a steady diet of antibiotics and things of that nature, the digestive system, the biome really, it's kind of like nuclear bomb goes through over and over again. So
and then there's antibiotics in our food, right? Like, so like when they're antibiotics, like the meats are being injected. I know some of the rules have changed with that, but there are loopholes around that. I mean, if you really look and see, they're still injecting them when they're born.
Wow.
So we're being exposed through that. And then the pesticides, like the glyphosate alone can be an
Right.
antibiotic,
Right.
the Roundup.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff going on that's really destroying and that's why that movie, Let Them Eat Dirt. If you watch that movie, it also talks about how asthma is so high here because we're just too clean. It's the hygiene hypothesis. Everything's clean. We don't allow our kids to play in dirt anymore.
Got to get those homeostatic soil organisms to stimulate the immune system. You can only do that playing in the dirt, good dirt. I tell my patients, got to be good dirt. We're not going to go into the pig pen and play in that dirt. But if we get out in the farm fields, well, at least some of the farm fields that haven't been, round up to death. So, but I appreciate that. That's such a good point. With that, what are some of the treatment strategies that you use for painful bladder syndrome, interstitial cystitis?
Number one is getting them in the mindset, because they're not going to follow. I tell them that this isn't going to be easy, and it's going to be, something that's going to be life altering. And so it may require, family getting on board,
Gotcha.
so that's the first thing. Like, got to get in the mindset, because if they don't have that mindset of knowing that, they have to make sacrifices, and I'm very honest with them, then they're not going to follow through, and then they're not going to get the results. And it's wasting both of our times, So there's a lot of preconditioning I have to do. And then we go in and we say, okay, what does your diet look like right now? And generally, if it's like very inflammatory, fast food, alcohol, lots and lots of processed foods, high sugar, food coloring, we've got to do that first before anything else. And then evaluating with the oxalates and the diet is the next step, because you can't just cut them out of your diet right away. You cannot, because they're stored in your tissues. And as soon as your body senses a change in homeostasis and like, okay, wait a minute, less oxalates coming in, we better excrete them, you'll dump. And believe me, I can tell you right now, I've dumped, and it's horrible when it happens, because it's almost like once it starts, you can't stop it.
Not good.
So we don't want that to happen. So we have to first do like an analysis. Let's say, where are the oxalates coming from? So like, and then also cleaning up like your terrain. Like, are you living in mold? I mean, let's be real here. Like, if you're breathing in mold every day, you're never going to get better. So there's just some of that, like, let's investigate and see where areas we can clean up your environment too. And then finally, the last piece of it is stress. Where can we take some of the stress out of your life? So it's very multi-pronged. It's multi-step, multi-pronged. There's other areas that are not nutrition that I have to dive into, because it's important for people's healing.
Yeah, that environmental exposure is so huge, and the epigenetic impact that it has on everything. And it's one of those realities. There's so many things that are impacting us that we don't see. And I think that's part of the problem. If you see a fire coming, you can prepare to try to mitigate it. But when you don't see the mold, when you don't see some of these EMFs and all these different things, I mean, obviously, if you're drinking and smoking too much, you should have a clue that might not be good for you. But there's a lot of things you just don't see, and you don't realize the impact. And so you basically try to establish a foundation of buy-in, if you will, that says, hey, this is a journey. We're not going to do something quick here. We got to start changing our lifestyle. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah. I mean, and when I was in the weight loss industry, it was the same thing, just in a different capacity, because I think people are so used to the quick fix. Oh, we're trying not to quick fix. That's right. That's what this is all about. But it's true. I mean, everybody wants that quick fix because they're programs. They go to the doctor, they get a medication, like, okay, make me better. Honestly, I was guilty of that myself. When I first was diagnosed, I was like, the doctor said, we think you have interstitial cystitis. And I was like, okay, tell me what to do. I'll do it. And it wasn't that quick fix. It was the medication they offered me was Almiron, which I would have had to take for the rest of my life. And that's when I realized, what? You're telling me I have this for life? It was a grave moment of my life when they told me that, because I couldn't register that, because in my mind, I was used to getting the antibiotic, and it's all gone. Everything's better. And this is not like that. This is a lifelong. I mean, it's taken me 3 years to heal. Let me just give you that perspective. 3 years to heal the bladder.
Mm-hmm. And which at the end of the day, it sounds like a long time, But when you use the word heal, you're saying, hey, now I don't need to get under any of those other medications. Now I can support myself, my immune system, my nutritional support. It's truly a healing rather than a temporary Band-Aid. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not a cure. And that's where I want people to understand, because I think that their heal and cure they're implying it's the same. It's not, because it's like cancer. Once you have it, you can have it again, but you can heal, meaning you don't actively have cancer, but it can be dormant, and it can, if the conditions allow, it can come back. That's the key, because I think when people know that, it makes the difference between somebody going back to their old patterns and then they're surprised when their condition arrives back. And wait, I thought I was cured. No, you're healed.
So important. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a huge distinction to try to help patients just understand. You've been taught wrong that when you take this medicine, it's a cure.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. And you really point the distinction very well between healing and curing, and so that people know that, hey, you're always going to be vulnerable to, toxins, you're going to be vulnerable to infections, you're going to be vulnerable to different things. But the more you invest in taking care of yourself, your body's going to fight through those things and be able to heal again and again, because a cure that's a pretty tough road to really get to that point where you can say, hey, you're cured, you're never going to have this happen again. That's just
can't make that promise. And I feel really bad when, people are disappointed when I tell them that. And it's important that's how you grow. You grow from disappointment. You grow from when you're being told, I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what I know. And I want you to know the truth, because if someone tells you they're going to cure you, you should run the other direction, because you can't.
Yes.
That's tough to hear.
So hard, but so good. So what are some of the treatments that you're utilizing in your clinic? I think you're doing some IV treatments.
No. I don't do that. I do that as through education. So the education, so when people come to me, I help them find clinics.
Okay.
And then I'll collaborate with the doctors at the clinic to talk about, for example, I've had to, one of the things I did first with myself was experimented with Ozone before I made the recommendation. So that was the first thing. Because I learned about Ozone through another colleague who had told me about it. And then I got Dr. Schallenberger's book and I was like, oh my God, this is great. But let me first try it first. So then I actually consulted with a doctor in another country. I forgot his name, but he told me about ozonated water. So, because I know that the gas can be very painful because it dries out the area. So we didn't want to jump right to gas. So we went and did the water. So I found a clinic in South Carolina, and I was going there and doing the ozonated water. And we developed the protocol together using the information from the doctor. So I helped her develop her ozonated water protocol for her future patients as well, using me as the test subject. So we did the ozonated water for a little while, and it was good. It was helpful. Not as painful going as I think gas could be initially. And then I bought my own machine, and then I started to self-treat, because I had to treat for a while in order to heal. The area was so damaged. I mean, when she first tried to cath me, she couldn't even get the pediatric catheter inside through the urethra, because it was so much fibrosis there. So much fibrosis. And so it was bleeding. It was a horrible experience initially, but then it started getting better, and it was like, wow, the cat's going in so smooth. So we knew we didn't have to look inside. We knew from the results of how much easier the catheter was going, and there was less bleeding, there was less inflammation, less pain, that it was improving. So that's how I started. And then from that point on, I just, work with, the people who come in, and I find clinics locally for them. And then I collaborate with those doctors and teach them what I know about the water protocol.
Okay.
Using the ozonated water, and then gradually transitioning over to the gas. But I also did the IV at this clinic as well.
And the IV administration through what method?
Major autohemotherapy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So those are some pretty primary approaches to kind of getting the kind of the acuteness or the chronic kind of calm down. Is that kind of the best go-to right off the bat?
And rectal insufflation as well. We did all three. I think and I drank the water. I think because locally you need to heal the tissue. So that's important. Plus there's infections, there's biofilms.
Okay.
I mean, it's the nature of, think about it, if you have dysbiosis in the gut, why wouldn't you have it in parts that are distal? Why wouldn't you? You would. They're connected. I mean, that's why people have, chronic, issues with coughing and like what do they call this? The esophagus can have issues,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Going all the way down the gastrointestinal tract, down through the bladder, even the skin. A lot of people have skin issues who have the leaky gut. They have the psoriasis and eczema. So all of that's interconnected. And so I do believe that the rectal insufflation is helpful from that perspective as well. But also drinking the water might also help with, whatever going through the gut. I'm not 100% familiar with the ozonated water and how the mechanisms are. I just know that, it doesn't hurt to have a little shot glass of water in addition to all your treatments that you're doing. You might as well, if you're already making the water to insulate, to use as an installation, you might as well just drink a little bit of it.
So you've kind of started the process of the healing. And then how do you support that with nutrition? What's I know it's kind of specific to each patient that walks into your door. They have their specific backgrounds, but what's kind of a general approach, what you do with nutrition for your patients with painful bladder syndrome and or other, conditions?
Step one is eliminate the inflammatory foods first. So that's like gluten, dairy, the top, soy, corn,
right.
The top, the general elimination diet. And then it's going to go into a low oxalate, low histamine diet.
Okay.
Each person has their upper threshold, but generally if we can keep people about 50 milligrams of oxalates, generally in that range, 50 to 100. So if someone's eating 3,000, let's say they're doing spinach smoothies twice a day and they're probably getting 3,000. So then it's going to be like, you have to taper the approach week by week. So you can't just cut it because then you're going to dump. So what you have to do is every week make substitutions. So if they're eating like an ounce of almonds, we'll have to go like maybe 3/4 ounce of almonds and add in some pumpkin seeds. And then a week after that, 1/2 ounce and add some pumpkin seeds. So it's going to be a gradual approach to reducing the oxalates while improving the composition of the diet, which we do with the rainbow diet. So what it is I show them the phytonutrient spectrum through the IFM. Okay. And through that, I try to get them to do about 30 new foods, 30 different types of foods a week with different colors. So when they make a meal, they have to have at least 5 different colors in their meal.
Okay.
Reds, oranges, yellows, purples, greens. Because all of that are phytonutrients. It's going to support the immune system because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to modulate your immune system and through that reduce inflammation. And that also involves oxalates because oxalates are pro-inflammatory and they also activate the inflammasome. So the oxalates have to be reduced in the diet. You have to. Plus they're excreted through the kidneys, excreted through the bladder, and they hurt when they come out. So it's very paramount for everyone who has a bladder pain issue to be on a low oxalate, but now also low histamine, because the histamines can also be adding to fuel to the fire.
So some of the, the histamines that I'm familiar with are, dried meats and, cured things. I know that I was kind of surprised recently because I probably learned this, but forgot that raw broccoli, raw cauliflower have some oxalate components. I don't know if that's part of the food restriction that you're doing, to start out with. I know people doing, the smoothie drinks, putting a lot of good things in, but it's high in oxalates, the spinach salad, all those kind of things. So are those in the category of foods that, you kind of have to start looking at taking out?
They're going to be foods that you probably don't want to eat at all because the oxalates are just too high. You just can't get away with it. And then it's not all or nothing. So there is, it's dose dependent. Let's put it that way. So it's not all or nothing. It's dose dependent. So if you construct your meal, and so what we do is generally with people, we'll have them start with a plate, and half the plate will be lean protein temporarily. This is just a temporary, just getting started. I don't want to people eating that way forever, but half the plate lean protein, and then another like 25 to 15 to 25% of it fat. So then you only have a little bit you have more wiggle room. So you only have to really modify a small part of your diet.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And that helps you kind of, all right, we're going to do mostly fruits and vegetables. We're going to pick things that are low oxalate. Grains are used as a condiment. Grains are a condiment. Grains are inflammatory.
Yes.
I can verify that because anytime my dog has had grains, explosive diarrhea. So I know grains are inflammatory for many people. So they're condiments.
Yes. So kind of keep those limited. And I'm sure that there's, what are the different tests that you use for your patients, lab tests, types of tests? Is there, blood types that are, more specific to a certain sensitivity than, others, or genetic types or anything like that?
I read the blood typing diet. I'm not using it because I haven't seen a lot of peer-reviewed research on it. So I've been kind of putting that on hold, although, there might be some anecdotal stuff that we can say, hey, if you're 8 plus, you might do better on more vegetables in your diet. But I don't really use that. I really like the Nutri-Eval test, which is really nice because it has everything. It's like people like simplicity. And this is nice because it's one test, blood draw, urine test, one lab, send it out. It gives you micronutrients. It gives you organic acids, including oxalates. They added oxalates to that panel. So that's nice. It has it checks for minerals, and it also checks for metals.
Okay.
It's a one snapshot of everything. And it really goes really well with a nutrigenomic test. Because if you do those things together, now you're looking at the genes. Somebody may have polymorphisms in, let's say, choline metabolism, or they may have them in like folate and, all those MTHFR, methylation genetics.
Right,
and then you can take a look at the diet and say, well, how can we improve these pathways? A lot of times the pathways may be negatively influenced by inflammation, or negatively influenced by metals or molds, a big one. So how can we improve? And then you have to look at like binders, maybe specific binders for mold, if they have mold illness or mold toxicity. Hey, listen, I'm a big believer in supplements because we can't get everything from our diet. We just can't. You can try, but it's very, very difficult.
Right.
So we do a lot of supplements as far as like B vitamins for people who need them, magnesium, minerals. So those are the two main ones, the Nutri-Eval and then the nutrigenomics together are really nice. And then I also love the hair tissue mineral analysis.
Okay.
I love that test. It's so simple. It's cheap. It's, not expensive. You just get some parts of your hair in the bag, you send it in, and it really does give you your tissue level of minerals. And it kind of, you can correlate that with blood work. If you did blood work, and you can correlate it with the Nutri-Eval, and it kind of gives you a nice snapshot on like where we can support, like magnesium, for example, is huge. I think it's the number one mineral deficiency. Yes, the number one.
That's a huge one. And so you spend a little bit of time trying to help detox as well with your patients?
Through foods, primarily. So picking foods that support phase 2 detoxification, like, broccoli sprouts, broccoli, mustard seeds, garlic, onions, but then also supplements like binders.
Yeah, good. And kind of wanted to check, where your thoughts were on some of the known types of diets out there. You've got the paleo diet, you've got the keto diet, you've got, the blood type diet, you've got all the different types of programs out there. I think many of them have great components. I don't think anything's a one size fits all, but what's your kind of general thought on a lot of those different approaches to dieting?
A diet is only as effective as somebody can stick to it. And I find some of these diets are just too restrictive, like especially keto. I don't dislike keto. I think that there are some people who do need it, especially diabetics or people who have like neurodegeneration. They seem to do very well on that, maybe even autistic. So that's going to be a very, very structured. And I would keep the foods out of the house because it's just a very difficult diet to follow. And honestly, I don't think most people who go in keto are truly in ketosis. Because isn't keto, the point of keto to be in ketosis?
Right.
I've had people tell me they're in keto and then we check their blood ketones. I'm like, you're not in ketosis, so you're not keto.
They haven't got there.
No. So I am actually a big believer of fasting. I think fasting is a much better way to train your body to go into ketosis than a keto diet. Because the problem with keto is people do it incorrectly. And they are also eating too much protein, not realizing protein can also go through the glycolytic pathway and become glucose and drive up insulin. So they're eating way too much meat, too much protein. They're not doing the right ratios. It's really a high fat, low protein, low carb diet.
Right. Yeah.
So most people can't stick to that. And, it takes very little carbs to pull you out of ketosis. I mean, for me personally, I've tested it. I have to be like 25 grams of carbohydrates to be able to get into ketosis. Anything higher than that, I'm no longer in ketosis.
You're out. Yes.
I'm out.
Yeah.
So it's better for me to fast. And I find fasting tends to be more beneficial because it's kind of easier to do because you're like, oh, I'm just not eating. As opposed to like, I have to count how many micronutrients of everything that I'm eating, which is so difficult to live like that. So I think it's case by case. I think some people do benefit from it. Same with paleo. The problem with paleo, it's very high oxalate. Very high oxalate. And I do want to make this blanket statement. Even though oxalates are really damaging for people with bladder pain syndrome, they're actually damaging to everybody.
Makes sense.
They're pro-inflammatory. They activate the inflammasome. You might not notice it, but it could be happening in someone who's really pounding down those oxalates. They might not notice it, but maybe they have other problems. Maybe they have the thyroid condition. Maybe they have joint pain or arthritis.
Right.
My father, great example, had prostatitis, and we did an organic acid on him. He had very high oxalates.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's just it. It's one of those things that people, it goes back to that healing and curing kind of mentality or, kind of the long haul. There's a lot of things that, people experience that just showed up. And you try to explain to them, yeah, but it was building up on you for 10 years, 20 years.
Thank you.
And
exactly.
That's right. And so that is kind of the deal there. So I really appreciate that thought line too. It's one of those things trying to help people understand things so that they understand, the choices they make have an impact, whether they're feeling it or not, good or bad. You can say, hey, eat this, and this is going to be good for you. And if they don't get the right response to what they're eating, they think, oh, well, that's not working for me. It's like, well, keep going, because it's still good for you. Drink water. It's still good for you. So you kind of have it from both sides.
That's the case with plant-based foods because a lot of people can't digest them very well. So that's where, I think I like the plate with the protein and, obviously supporting digestion, helping them to digest it with digestive enzymes. Maybe some people need the betaine HCl, there's bitters. But I think diet does change over time as your microbiome and your biochemistry change. Great example is in weight loss. If someone's obese and they come to you and they generally need more of that keto approach initially because they have to be very careful with their insulin levels because their insulin is already high. So they seem to do better initially on a lower carb diet, but then as their insulin sensitivity improves over time through exercise, losing body fat, less inflammation in the body, they actually can eat more carbs. So I think diet has to also evolve with the person. It's not static.
Yeah, as the body repairs and regenerates, you can get back into some things that you weren't able to tolerate before. So kind of as we're wrapping up here a little bit, do you have any thoughts about the seasonal approach for eating the foods that are more seasonally appropriate to the area you live in or the country you live in or, all the other demographic issues that come up?
I would love to be able to support that with what's available to people and what they buy. I do believe that there is a lot to be said about where you live and what's seasonal and what you choose to eat at that time. Unfortunately, it's a very difficult hurdle and not an area that I focused on because it's hard enough for me just to get people off of the inflammatory processed foods. So my first focus for them is let's just get you off of the inflammatory foods. Let's just get you off of, 80-20 rule. So I'm all about 80-20 rule. I don't believe in 100% of anything. I think if you do an 80-20, you can allow a little leeway here and there. I want people to have a good quality of life and I don't want them to stress over what they're putting on their plate. And if they can't find local foods because that's what's available, in their grocery stores, then whatever you put in your mouth that's whole, it's fine. I mean, it's better than, I don't want to stress people out. So I would love to see grocery stores and local farmers make these types of things available. And when it's more widely available, then that can be definitely a great future program, maybe like in group coaching or something to teach people on that, because there is definitely a lot of benefits to eating things seasonally.
Yeah, and I like that too. If you're going to stress out about something you're doing, you're just adding to the stress. The stress is just adding to the problem. So yeah, I always tell people, I kind of like that rule too. It's kind of the 80-20 or 80-10-10. If you're going to have that piece of chocolate cake, don't stress out about it. Just enjoy it. Holidays are coming up, those kinds of things. So anything else that you'd want to cover as we close here? Any other thoughts that you have?
I feel like nutrition is going to be the field of the future. I think that there's a lot of people that are looking at this because of the situation that we're in right now with people's attention to their immune system and, viruses and things. There's a lot of hope for people. And especially I feel like in conventional medicine, I do believe that we're going to see a nice shift into incorporation of nutrition. You can hear a lot more doctors talking about, what are you eating and what have you not been eating? And so we're in a really exciting time. And I'm very happy to see, people like you guys having these types of interviews. So I thank you so much for having me and having the ability to share this, because I think it's important for people to be able to see that there are alternatives for you. And if you're not feeling well, you have, chronic pain, chronic inflammation, in this case, bladder pain syndrome, there are solutions out there for you.
That's awesome. And where can people get a hold of you and follow up to work with you?
ichealer.com is my website. I have Instagram, which is Dr. Mandy DCN. I'm on Facebook, IC Healer. I have a private Facebook group as well, which just look up Interstitial Cystitis, it comes up. And then I am also on TikTok, sadly.
So you have a couple of different routes?
Yeah, the TikTok thing was my daughter's idea. So I do repurpose my Instagram to TikTok. I'm not a fan of it, but okay. So you guys can find me there too if you're on TikTok.
Hey, well, I would encourage people to reach out. I know there's like we started, there's a ton of people that suffer from painful bladder syndrome, interstitial cystitis, and other digestive things that I know you could be helpful for. And I'll just leave the interview with the word that you just used. I hope people will be hopeful. Because there is an opportunity for people to get well, to have healing, and to have, empowerment. So I appreciate you being with us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, doctor.